What if the single thing quietly preventing your spiritual awakening isn't outside of you? Your schedule, your church, your teacher, but written into the very architecture of your body as a buried memory? What if centuries-old manuscripts found in a jar at Nag Hammadi suggest there was once a private teaching attributed in those texts to Jesus that, if remembered, would change how you hold yourself in the world? This may be preventing your spiritual awakening, and in the next several minutes, I'll show you what to check, what to expect, and how to respond if something stirs. First, a brief but important context. The writings I'll refer to come from what scholars call Gnostic texts, documents discovered in the mid-20th century at Nag Hammadi, and among them is the Gospel of Philip. These are historical writings, alternative streams of early Christian thought that circulated alongside the texts that later formed the mainstream canon. They preserve teachings and experiences that were sometimes labeled heretical by the emerging institutional church, and were often suppressed or forgotten. When I say the texts describe, or according to some of these writings, I am not saying they are equivalent to canonical scripture. I'm offering them as historical witnesses to experiences reported by seekers and communities who use different language to point at an inner reality. These writings propose a cosmology that helps explain why such knowledge might have been hidden. They speak of a primordial source, sometimes called the monad, that sent sparks of itself into the world. A secondary builder, the demiurge, and its agents, the archontes, are described as the architects of a system that obscures memory and keeps the spark from recognizing its origin. That language is dense and symbolic, but the practical claim beneath it is simple. Something, call it inertia, habit, cultural architecture, or archontic interference, works to keep you from remembering who you are. And according to certain ancient teachers, the proof of that spark is not just metaphoric, it is embodied. The core claim preserved in these texts is startlingly plain. Some people carry 3 tangible marks in their bodies, answers, as it were, written into their flesh. These marks are described as signs of origin, perception, and authority. One is at the base of the skull, a kind of line or subtle depression around the place where head meets neck. Another is on the outer edge of the hand, near the pinky and wrist, described as a small ridge or mark where touch and reaching meet perception. The third rests above the sternum, near the center of the chest, associated with willingness to command and to act from remembered authority. Hear me. I am not presenting these as medical diagnosis, and I am not promising that finding such a sign will fix your life or grant you supernatural powers. The texts describe these marks as possible signs. Many people will find nothing, and many who do find something will interpret it differently. What I am offering is a careful, gentle way to check for what these sources describe, and to notice how your body, mind, and heart respond when you do. Before we do anything physical, a safety reminder: be gentle. If you have health concerns, recent injuries, chronic pain, or any medical condition that affects your neck, head, hands, or chest, please do not perform physical checks without consulting a professional. Stop immediately if anything hurts. These are subtle, tactile explorations meant to be done with kindness toward your body. Begin by finding a quiet place where you won't be interrupted for a few minutes. Sit in a comfortable chair with both feet on the ground. Close your eyes if that helps, and take 3 slow, deliberate breaths. Inhale through your nose for a count that feels natural. Hold for half a beat, then exhale slowly and fully. Let each breath settle the rush of thought, like a tide drawing back from the shore so that the sand of attention is revealed. As you breathe, notice the chatter that arises. Some part of you may immediately dismiss what you're doing. This is silly. I'm just imagining, or this is superstition. In the framework I'm describing, those immediate, automatic dismissals are a recognizable pattern, predictable archontic interference. It's not a moral failing. It's a strategy of the system that resists recognition. When those thoughts appear, do not fight them. Simply name them. That's doubt. That's a dismissal. And bring your attention back to your breath and the part of the body we're about to check. Now, with your breathing settled and your attention gentle, we'll explore the 3 marks. Each check is brief. Each is done with softness. Keep in mind, these descriptions are based on accounts in ancient texts and on contemporary reports from those who work in this tradition. They are not medical descriptions. First check, the base of the skull. Tilt your head slowly forward so the back of your neck stretches slightly. Place the pads of your fingers gently at the place where the skull meets the neck, about an inch or 2 above the hairline depending on your anatomy. You may sense a slight horizontal line, a change in contour, a thin ridge, or a subtle softness, like the seam where 2 pieces of a garment are joined. Some report feeling a faint warmth or a memoried pressure. Others find only a visual line if they look with a mirror. Be tender. No force. Explore with curiosity rather than expectation. If anything causes discomfort, stop. Pause here for a moment. Breathe in. Breathe out. Notice any sensation, physical or emotional, that arises when your fingers touch that place. Does your attention steady? Do memories come up? Do you feel a flicker, a subtle openness? Or do you feel nothing at all? Either response is valid information. If you sensed something, hold that gently. If not, simply note, I felt neutral. Mini hook. This is why institutions feared this teaching. Because when memory surfaces in the body, it reduces dependence on external intermediaries. Second check, the lateral hand mark. Rest one hand palm up in your lap. With the other hand, trace very gently along the outer edge of the hand, from the knuckle of the pinky toward the wrist, focusing on the area where the pinky finger's connective tendons meet the wrist crease. Some people report a small ridge or soft line there, or a sensation when pressure is applied, a faint buzz, a little catch in attention. Others feel nothing but warmth or a rising sense of clarity around perception. Again, be soft. This is not an exercise in pressure. It's an invitation to notice. After a gentle exploration, pause. Close your eyes if they're open. Breathe in, breathe out. Say to yourself silently, I am noticing. Let the mind's commentary, if any, pass. If the thought, this is ridiculous, arrives, label it, archontic dismissal, and return to the body. Feeling, not arguing, is the method here. Mini hook. Feel that? That reaction itself is evidence of something wanting to wake up. Third check, the center chest. Place 1 or 2 fingers lightly on the area slightly above the breastbone, about the level of where a pendant would rest. Do not press deeply, just a gentle connection. Some people report a small hollow, a slight warmth, or a tightening that feels like the memory of authority, or a readiness to speak. Others feel tenderness, or nothing at all. Remember, do not force any movement or apply strong pressure. If anything is sore or if you have chest conditions, skip this step and come back to it later with medical clearance. Hold your hand there for a breath or 2. As you inhale, imagine your attention extending into that point above the sternum. As you exhale, let any tension soften. Notice whether your posture subtly changes, whether your throat unclenches, whether a small inner voice seems clearer. If dismissive thoughts appear, I'm not spiritual enough. This is nonsense. Identify them and allow them to float by like clouds. Now stop the tactile checks and simply rest with your breathing. Give yourself 20 to 30 seconds of quiet. Let whatever arose settle into an observation rather than a story. If you experienced any subtle sensation, a warmth, a line, a memory, consider for a moment that you may have brushed against an inner sign described in ancient accounts. If you felt nothing, that is also information. Awakening is not proven by one instant of sensation, nor is it invalidated by absent sensation. If, during those checks, you felt anything at all, an opening, a warmth, a line, a sense of recognition, please type the single word recognition in the comments now. This is not a test. It's a way to build a quiet, shared memory. You are not alone in this inquiry. A single word will help us see a pattern of collective anamnesis without turning this into a performance. Before we proceed to the activation, a short note on the resistance you may have noticed. The inner distractions, rapid dismissals, sudden busyness, sarcastic commentary, are part of the predictable archontic pattern I mentioned earlier. They often rise immediately after a tentative edge of recognition, as if the system quickly tries to pull you back into familiar doubt. The technique here is simple. Observe the reaction without debate and return to the body. Think of it as allowing a door to open a hair and then giving it time to steady, rather than slamming it shut with argument. If you found your attention racing after the checks, try this brief grounding. Take 3 slow breaths and silently name each breath. In, out, rest. Don't add commentary, don't justify. Repeat until the racing slows. This is not about winning, it's about creating the small interior conditions where memory can surface. Now, whether or not you experienced anything tangible in the checks, there is an activation you can offer as a personal acknowledgement. The ancient texts often use declarative phrases to call attention inward, words that function less as spells and more as honest admissions to the self. The activation I'll give you is short and meant as a simple naming. It helps align attention and intention. As always, this is not a promise of instant transformation. Think of it as a signal you send to yourself, a clear personal recognition. When you feel ready, take one more grounding breath. Then, aloud or silently, speak this 9-word declaration. I recognize my origin. Activate perception. Claim my command. Say it once. Pause. If it feels appropriate, say it a second time. Notice how your voice and body respond. The declaration is an affirmation of remembrance, recognition of origin, permission for perception, and acceptance of personal command. It is intentionally neutral in doctrinal address. You may think of it as speaking to your innermost source, to God, to the monad, or simply as an internal assertion that realigns your attention. Again, this is not a formula for guaranteed miracles. Some people will feel a meaningful shift, others will notice nothing immediate. The purpose is to help you practice claiming inner authority and to invite a subtle recalibration of how you inhabit your body and attention. After speaking the declaration, sit for a moment in quiet. Notice any subtle changes, posture, breath depth, a loosening in the throat, a steadier gaze when you open your eyes. If something shifted, even slightly, that shift is a form of anamnesis, an inner remembrance that can deepen with repeated, careful attention. If nothing changed, that's okay too. Awakening, in the most honest sense, is less an event and more a process of relearning to attend. What does recognition actually change in daily life? It doesn't guarantee dramatic signs. But when recognition grows, it tends to show up as increased discernment, less desperation for external validation, and an inner sense of authorization to act in ways that align with what you sense is true. People who speak of deeper anamnesis often describe a reduced need to outsource spiritual authority, to rely less on expert pronouncements and more on felt alignment. That can be disorienting at first, especially in communities built around clear external leadership. Allow that disorientation to be a teacher rather than a crisis. Take small steps. Practice noticing the felt sense before seeking external confirmation. Test promptings in practical ways that are safe and loving. And cultivate a community where shared recognition matters more than doctrinal supremacy. A few important clarifications before we close. The cosmology I described, the monad, the demiurge, the archontes, is the language of certain Gnostic traditions. These ideas offer a symbolic framework for understanding how memory might be obscured. They are not presented here as replacements for mainstream Christian doctrine. If you belong to a tradition that holds different theological commitments, consider these ideas as one set of lenses among many, useful for some, irrelevant for others. If anything I've shared raises doctrinal questions or concerns for you, I encourage you to discuss them with trusted spiritual mentors and to weigh the claims carefully. Also remember the safety guidance. These tactile checks are gentle investigations, not medical procedures. If you have any medical conditions, neck problems, cardiac issues, recent surgeries, do not perform the chest or skull checks without professional advice. And if any step causes pain or distress, stop immediately. Finally, a word about community. This is not an invitation to isolate. The texts that preserve these teachings describe a process of collective recognition, anamnesis that gathers. If you felt anything during the checks, type the single word recognition in the comments below, so we can hold a quiet, collective witness to what emerges. We will use that simple signal to build a slow map of shared experience without turning this into hype or spectacle. If this message has touched you and you want to continue, subscribe to this channel. In the next installment, we'll go deeper. From verification to practical activation. How to cultivate this remembered authority in everyday choices, prayer, and service without falling into narcissism or escapism. Subscribe to join that next step. As always, approach these practices with gentleness, discernment, and a willingness to test inwardly and outwardly in ways that bless others. To close, whatever name you give to the inner source, the monad, God, Christ alive in you, the divine spark. This invitation is simple. Remember, recognition is not theft from institutions. It is freedom for authentic belonging. If anything stirred, even a whisper, know that many have felt that whisper before and many will again. The path forward is patient, collective, and rooted in small, steady acts of attention.